popular election was that there has been numerous atrocities done all over Bangladesh, specifically one that includes the heinous crime of rape. So that is still being investigated by the security forces as well. There was a notion in which we understood that the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was set to visit in the swearing ceremony of Tariq Rahman here in Dhaka. So of course that it does not have any distinctive answer, whether there's a yes or whether there's a no, whether he will be coming. I want to begin with Norman Floyd Barnes. What are your observations? What have you seen on social media regarding Bangladesh, and what is the prospectus? How do you think that we are going to see? We also know that the Jamaat-e-Islami had never had this amount of seats in any election of the past, so that is also a big shock. I want to get a knowledge from Norman Floyd Barnes.
Greetings again. Thank you again for the time. This has been a historical, we call it a landslide, or a very historical election for the people of Bangladesh. It's the first time in 20 years you have a male that's going to be serving as prime minister. First time in 17 years, people had a chance to vote. You have a very young population who, say 5 million of them, had the first time to have their opinion heard. Now the situation is shifting from a unelected official running the country to establishing a new democracy. That is where we at right now. I believe the swearing in will be on the 17th. And once that swearing in is finished, Bangladesh is now thrust into of dealing with different people. Pakistan, India, the relationship is going to change. Turkey, that's one country that's going to be involved, and definitely China. China is heavy into infrastructure development and investment. So these types of relationship will be intensified, and at the same time, the United States and the Western world, they have to balance. You have to find a way of balancing the U.S. trade and military, along with what's going on in Southeast Asia. So like I mentioned before, this is going to be basically a hub, a very important location for South Asia, excuse me, in the future. We are now looking at a transition from what we call a third world country into a new emerging economy. I understand that we're looking at moving, hopefully this in the next 8 years, moving to a $1 trillion economy. That's going to have to be done. They're going to be changing from the current situation, the current, I guess, economic situation with textile and shirts and apparel that been made and so been sent out, ready-made apparel. Now they're going to have to look at agriculture. You're going to have to look at different other technologies, other things coming in. Who's bringing in the infrastructure? What type of infrastructure is going to be coming in? How are we going to work with India? That's a big one. How are we going to be able to work with India? And how are we going to be able to basically set a standard and appear to be stable? Investors love stability. So this election has basically created that opportunity for stability. So it's now up to the Bangladesh nation and its elected officials to prove to the world that they deserve an opportunity and they should be one of the emerging countries coming up in the future.
Of course, important updates regarding all of these issues from Norman Floyd Barnes. From what I took out regarding India and the neighborhood around the surrounding countries. Of course, it's important to understand the nexus between India and Pakistan. Last summer, we've seen them tussle one another, and a strange number of foreign journalists were here to cover this entire elections. Almost 400 plus journalists were here, respective from both India and Pakistan, who were covering the entirety of this election. Even last night, some of these journalists were with Tariq Rahman in his meet and greet with the press as his new role is coming about. We still do not know who shall serve in what position, even between the ranks of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. It is a matter of time before we understand. However, both our neighbors, historically the Indian subcontinent, both our neighbors are not meeting eye to eye, and there is a risk that we shall possess if we walk a certain path. It's important to understand which way we shall be walking, a walk on our own, and of course, if not, will we be seeking help from our neighborhood? That is important. I want to ask to John Dalton, you know, some of the contestants who have won in the banner of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, they are very known, very educated people, those who have even appeared on this show as we were talking during the break. One of those includes Chandpur 1's elected seat, ex-State Minister of Education, Ehsanul Haq Milan, who is very known to be someone who cracked down on the education systems in Bangladesh and is now planning on reforming of this system, as well as the Mohammadpur seat in Dhaka's capital was very controversial over the weekend. Some media houses claimed to say that Mamunul had won, whereas some were saying that it was Bobby Hajjaj instead. And that number to how one has lost was concerned. Over the weekend at the EC, Mamunul had visited the EC to complain and to have a recount, and Jamaat-e-Islami in total had pushed through for a recount on 30 seats. And if there was a recount, maybe there could be someone else who would be the winner. Of course, that would make sure that the election commission processes and their internal administration be questioned once more. So I want to ask you, what are your observations and how are you seeing the upcoming days for Bangladesh?
Well, I think it was a generally positive experience. I think that BNP's strategy was to put up candidates that were well known and from the core BNP group and let them contest those seats so that the people would recognize them and likely to get a vote. I think that that one of the things that about the country, if you look at the map of how the country is divided, okay, Jamaat has won 77 seats, but only 15 of them are east of the Padma River. And so all the concentration of Jamaat is on the west coast. They carried and won the majority in Khulna, they carried and won the majority in Rangpur. So there has to be something in the voters' mentality about concern with India, concern about either it's on a religious basis or it's on the basis of tensions between the two countries. And it's going to take a clever guy to sit and manage that kind of those areas to make sure that they are not hotspots for any kind of additional tension between India and Bangladesh. I mean, it's just obvious. You look at a map and you say, oh my goodness, that's really strange that Khulna and Rangpur have the only ones that have a majority for Jamaat in those divisions. Right. So right on the border, that's going to be an issue. It's obvious in elections in third world, or let's say developing country elections, that there's two stories that come out. The first story is the guy who's declared the winner is so happy, I'm the winner. The guy who lost is, I get cheated.
Right.
So that's happening here a little bit. But I think that Jamaat legitimately has a right, because the counting was confused by the two ballots that were submitted, the election ballot plus the referendum ballot. Some of those are out of whack. As I said, I think that the logical decision by some people was to put the pink in their pocket and walk out, not to submit a vote on the referendum, which is why you have such a huge discrepancy in some constituencies. But it's like, I think it's important to sort of get some stability, let these issues play themselves out, totally normal, not to be contested. I mean, the Election Commission deserves credit. The Yunus advisors, Yunus himself and his advisors deserve credit. The election basically went off without a hitch. And unlike all of the others, there was less violence and people were total festive. That's the word we see in all of these stories about it. This is a festive election. Now there is a problem I just want to mention before you go in and bring back Norman. Now this man, who's going to be the new Prime Minister, is facing an enormous challenge, as I mentioned before. And I hope that he understands the need to diversify his cabinet with people who are broadly representative of the overall population.
Correct.
Women, youth, people who are going to bring new thoughts. I mean, the candidates themselves were the old guard. If he can bring into his cabinet some younger faces maybe even have people from Jamaat. I mean, Bobby Hajjaj is a good example of someone
Yeah, and
who
he's-
should, if he was elected legitimately, would be a good candidate for the cabinet. He might even reach across the aisle and take somebody from NCP. But if he would make more youthful efforts, be good, and more kind of at least some representation of unity. More
Right.
women, more Jamaat.
Of course, that's important understanding from John Dalton. I want to ask Norman Floyd a very simple question regarding all of these results that are coming out. We know that there has been some who have won by a landslide. That includes Ariful Haq Chaudhary winning Sylhet 4 by over 1 lakh votes. He was known for someone who had done for the community in that holy city. But there's also some upsets that we see that in a position that has lost by just a few couple of votes. But there are problems that includes cronyism inside this very popular party, the BNP, as Sir Dalton was saying that he must look for a rechange in his own party. So do you think that is important in the long run, especially because the leader Tariq Rahman is set today to visit his opposition, of course, Mr. Shafiqur Rahman, as well as Nahid Islam in his residence today. What is your values and views regarding this recent?
Yes, I think this is very important, it's a very strategic, and it's going to be necessary for success of the country. There's a saying over here, we use CNN had a saying basis, and the Gen Z was responsible for the revolution that started this, but the old guard is continuing this. So what that tells me is that the country itself likes stability, they like familiarity, they don't like change. However, the Gen Zs are not going away. They're going to grow like locusts. They're going to grow. So you have to include them in everything you do, or you're going to have the same thing over again. So you have a powerful force there. The Gen Zs in the country need to be represented, need to be involved. They need to keep busy working with the old guard and putting together a solution for this country in the future. There has to be a point where there'll be a handoff and a shift. The old guard will, some point in time, will have to go set aside, and the new Gen Zs and the new people coming in will have to take over. But the new people need to have that experience, that training, their involvement, and their interaction now, instead of shock treatment. Oh, they went out, we're coming in, and now we got to do this all over again, and we don't have the relationship. Bangladesh is a now legitimate, recognized nation. They have a government, and that government has to position itself as part of an emerging country that is growing, and it must be inclusive of all parties in the country for this thing to work. It can't be exclusive for a certain party to do the same. If we're doing the same thing we just had, we just overthrow and we're doing the same thing over again. So a wiser thought would basically be to include your opposition in these positions, to include them in making decisions, put them in a position where they have to make decisions based on the country. Let them decide how they want the country to run.
Right.
And work with them on achieving that. And at the same time, they have to present a posture that they be represented that we are a legitimate country, we are stable, and we are ready to engage the world.
Of course, very important updates coming out from Norman Floyd Barnes' desk. I must thank him for today and his commentary made regarding this issue. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a time to take a short break, but after the break, there is more on this election. Of course, there's a lot of knowledge, lot of terminology, lot of details coming out, which we will share with you just after a short break. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back on International Affairs, and I'm very proud to be talking about our nation's election and its results and what the people are feeling about it, as it has international significance. As Norman Floyd Barnes was joining on this program, and he was saying that it is now a very big challenge for the winning side of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and its leader Tariq Rahman, because the people understand what a fascist looks like and they shall not be fooled once more. And that definitely includes to defeat cronyism that is happening, or those who are bootlickers of the party who only understand the language of bootlicking, and that is very dangerous for a party like BNP. Even before the election had begun or the results were developed, we have seen someone who came out in a threatening kind of a tone regarding, if they do not vote for this power, this shall happen. And that very moment that became viral, the party BNP had suspended him from all kind of activities, thrown him out of the party. That says a big volume about the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, which is now being held by Tariq Rahman. And of course, today, this very evening, Mr. Rahman will visit the residence of the Jamaat-e-Islami Amir at 7 and Nahid Islam's residence at 8 p.m. This is to understand and to not allow, or to see the grievances that each side had faced. Of course, it is a fight. Election is to understand what the majority wants to know and how it wants the country to be governed. There has been certain upsets that have happened in this election, but I want to know, as Norman was saying, and as you were also understanding what he was saying, do you think it is a very big challenge? Because people have overthrown a long-running government of 15 years just 2 years ago, and the wounds have still not healed. 1,400 lives were lost. All of these problems cannot be ignored, as far as I see.
I know they can't be ignored, but you cannot obsess about them. I mean, I think you have to have a positive spirit and a positive view going forward, and assume that BNP will be a responsible party and will lead with some integrity, and will understand the issues that gave rise to the revolution, the Monsoon Revolution, the July Revolution, as you want to call it. I mean, women, poverty, economic development, business, and money need to be on the front burner to talk about this. Now, I need to say something about the referendum.
Sure.
Okay, the referendum, basically, the way it was structured and what we have now, it was basically a beauty contest. And the vote yes or no basically said, yes, we're in favor of reform. I think that's only interpretation you can make about that vote. You cannot interpret, okay, we endorse upper level parliament, we endorse this or that. The question was so convoluted that it's impossible to come to a rational conclusion that this is what the voters wanted.
Right.
So I think the only logical thing you can say is people in Bangladesh want reform. They voted yes. Okay? The no vote was a wasted vote, in my opinion. There was only one thing to do. Vote yes or put the pink in your pocket. Because no is, if you didn't understand it, then you could say, well, I don't understand it, so I'm voting that no only because I want more clarity. But I don't think that was what people were doing. The no votes were basically AL, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, but I think that it's very, very important to make sure that you follow the rule of law, that you understand that the Constitution has very specific guidelines on what should be done with the referendum, and that in that context, people do not sort of accommodate the sort of interim government where we lack the rule of law and people just simply, well, we had to make something. We were undaunted. We're going to push forward. We're going to have a referendum. We're going to put it on the ballot. We're not going to be stopped by legalese and legal limitations and constitutional limitations. But now we have a government, and now the government has to go back to being an orderly kind of a process where the Constitution and laws prevail, and that political power is not a substitute for integrity in decision making on a legal and constitutional basis.
Of course, very important. One last question, as I want to understand your views regarding women in Parliament. This time around, we have 7 who have won in various seats, and of course, it's a very small share. But the Bangladesh Parliament also has 50 reserved seats for women. So I want to know, even though the female presence amongst directly elected MPs is relatively low in this election, and with the majority of directly elected women coming from the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, your views and your thoughts for women empowerment in the upcoming parliamentary sessions?
Well, I think that the number is very, very small. It's indication, however, that if women run under a party banner and the party supports them, that they have a chance of being elected in various constituencies. I hope that the 50 reserved seats really don't have as much impact on parliamentary decision making, but they definitely have some power. And if they were to join together and try to constitute some kind of a force to bring about a focus on women's issues, I think that would be a big, big step forward, regardless of their political leanings, regardless of their party. I mean, there needs to be some sort of a philosophy and a policy and a program dedicated to getting women involved in society, and then the next go round having them contest more seats on their own. These 50 reserved seats, it kind of like is a token, if you will accept my interpretation.
Of course.
The 7 who ran and won, hats off. Hats off to you. The rough and tumble. Good for you.
Of course, out of the 7, one does take the attention to Barrister Rumin Farhana, who has also appeared in this very television studio. She has been removed from the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, but she has ran as an independent, and she has won the Brahmanbaria 2 seat. So much empowerment to her. Ladies and gentlemen, this was an interesting show. I want to thank for the contribution and insight from John Dalton, as well as Norman Floyd Barnes, who had joined us from Washington, D.C. There is a significant reminder for February 15th, which holds historical importance in relation to the United Nations, primarily as the date of the largest coordinated global peace protest in human history. I'm talking about 2003 anti-war protest, the day that the world said no. Between 8 million and 30 million people in over 600 cities worldwide protested against the imminent US-led invasion of Iraq. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today. I shall see you on tomorrow's International Affairs.